Baton Rouge, and that's where I was born.
Really? So were you raised in that area too, or no?
Um, no, I don't remember how long mom and dad lived there around the time I was born. My dad was a pastor, and he pastored at two or three different churches over the course of my early life, and then they moved into Arkansas. So most of the upbringing that I remember was in Arkansas. So what's funny is that when somebody asks me where I'm from, I get to pick and choose my answer based on what the topic of conversation is, because I born in Louisiana, raised in the most I can remember in Arkansas. I went to college at in Monroe at what was Northeast Louisiana at the time. Then I've been in Texas for almost 30 years, so I can pick what answer I want based on what serves me best. But when they really are asking where are you born, I'm a Louisiana boy.
Gotcha. A lot of times if I'm not in Louisiana, in any other part of the country, I'm from a little town called Homa, but I live in Lafayette right now. So
Oh yeah, yeah.
to keep the conversation going, they ask me where you're from. I say, well, New Orleans. It's like, okay, well, they can go from there. I say, well, I've heard of New Orleans.
Right.
If I say something like Homa, it's like, well, where's Homa? South of New Orleans. Well, I didn't know if there was anything south of New Orleans. And it takes it goes all off in the weeds and stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
I know how that is. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I know myself as well as a lot of other members want to know, how did you get started in Toastmasters? How did it start for you?
Well, years and years and years ago, back probably in the early 90s, I had attended a couple of business conventions, and I heard a couple of speakers that were just phenomenal. Besides the rah rah of the moment that motivational speakers many times have, I saw people that I had been at the convention with, coworkers and friends and such, taking the things to heart that they had said and applying them in their work and in their personal life. And I thought, I would really like to have that kind of impact on people. And the two speakers were Zig Ziglar and Les Brown, obviously two, guys who are just at the very top of the mountain. And so I emailed both of their offices, and I said, I would love to be able to do what you do. What do you recommend? And I was coming at it, I guess, initially from a professional speaking standpoint. And both of them responded it was probably a standard response that was emailed from their office, because I'm sure they were asked this many, many times. But they both said in different words, don't do anything at all in the speaking business until you polish your presentation skills. And they both gave about 4 or 5 different recommendations, and a common one on the list was Toastmasters. Well, I may not be the smartest person in the world, but I'm not the dumbest either. And so I figure if these two people who are at the top of the mountain that I want to climb are giving me the same advice, and nothing's in it for them, it's probably good advice. So at the time, I was working at a company that had a Toastmasters club there, and I went, visited the club, and I hated it. And the reason was because the culture of the club um, does not reflect what we're supposed to be about as far as being a supportive and encouraging environment. I mean, it was the evaluations had kind of a mean edge to them, and I did not get the vibe from this group that they were about being warm and encouraging and supportive. So I thought, okay, that's what Toastmasters is. It's not for me. And because and I guess part of the lesson there is it matters what kind of culture, what kind of climate you have in your club, because a number of years later, I changed jobs a couple of times, and when I went to work at the employer where I am now, I learned very early on that they had a Toastmasters club, and I remember thinking, I know what Toastmasters is. I remember visiting that club. It's not for me, so no, I'm not interested. Well, about a year went by, and all through that year, I saw different flyers around in the break rooms at the company where I work, and they got my attention. Some of them were funny, they were informative, and so finally I decided, maybe I should give this another try. And I'm an IT guy, and there were a couple of people in the IT department who were members, and I thought, well, they don't seem like horrible people, so I decided to visit, and it was an entirely different thing. I mean, it was like I walked in, and it was I got the sense that it was a fun environment. It was a supportive and encouraging environment. And it was one of the way I describe it. It was like, I walk in, it's like I have found my tribe. And so it really does go to the fact that the culture, the climate, the supportiveness that visitors sense in your club is very important, because it may repel them or it may attract them. And so for my club, and not to pat myself on the back too much, but that environment drew someone to the club who became a world champion of public speaking. So when you have a visitor in your club, you never know, they might be your not your next, but a future district director. They may be a world champion of public speaking. They may be an international president. But you have to have that kind of environment that draws and welcomes them. So that's sort of the story of how I got to Toastmasters, what drew me in, what repelled me a little while, but what drew me in. And so I'm thankful. Ultimately, I mean, I would have benefited sooner if I had joined sooner, but I'm ultimately glad for the journey that brought me to Toastmasters, because it makes me appreciate the organization, but also my home club to a much greater degree.
Right.
So that's a long-winded version.
We're going to talk about your journey in a little bit, but I want to ask you, are you still a member of that club?
Absolutely. I still work for that company. What's weird is a lot of people think, oh, when someone becomes a world champion of public speaking, they instantly become a full-time speaker. And for those who have that interest, they can. It's not automatic, but I love what I do. I'm good at it, and I like the people I work with. So I still work at that company. And the way I look at it, my club meets every Wednesday at noon. I'm generally there every Wednesday at noon, and I still gain benefit from the program. So yeah, I'm still actively involved. There are times when I'm not able to attend meetings if some of the meetings, IT department meetings or such, runs over, but it doesn't frequently. So I would say that I attend 90% or greater of the meetings that we have.
What is that like for you to go into a meeting? You're a world champion. What is that like for you? How do they look at you?
Well, everybody needs a place where they can just be Joel or Jim or Phil. You need a place where you can just be you. And the members of my home club, they recognize the accomplishment. They honor me. I had to kind of tell them, anytime we would have a guest who knew nothing about Toastmasters, right away they were telling me, well, we have world champion of public speaking. But they don't know what that means. They don't have any context. So, just say we have some accomplished speakers and good mentors, and just let it go. You don't have to do the promotion. So it's very cool. I mean, they honor me, and I have to tell them, though, when I speak, and especially when some newer Toastmasters are giving me evaluations, don't get into this whole, oh, I could never tell a world champion anything to improve. I'm like, I am not perfect. I'm far from it. And if you don't give me useful and valuable feedback, you're wasting your time, and you're wasting everybody's time and my time. So they treat me well. They honor me. And what's interesting, this week, my club is 25 years old, and this week we're having a special anniversary meeting. Our CEO is coming, and they've asked me to deliver my world championship speech. So I'd love the chance to do that.
Awesome.
So they treat me well. They treat me really, really well, and I'm thankful for it.
2 weeks ago, I talked to Aaron Beverly, and because he still works with a company that he got started within a corporate club as well, and nobody knew that he competed. So how did your company react to that when you won? Did they know, first of all?
Well, yeah, they did. For those on the call who don't know my particular journey, and I don't know if you know this, Joel, but I competed in the World Championship three times in a row, in fact, 2001, 2, and 3. And the first year, and I won my district's humorous speech contest before that. So we had a company newsletter. When I won the district's humorous speech contest, they put that in the newsletter, and I got some very nice comments about it. And then when I competed in international speech, the first year that I went to the World Championship, they put a nice write-up in the newsletter. And this is back I feel so old saying this. This is back in the olden days when our newsletter was actually a printed thing that you held in your hand. Yeah. Obviously, that's been replaced now with technology, but they had a very, very nice write-up to have a photographer come and take my picture with my what at the time was the semifinal. It was a regional, so I had the regional trophy, and it was really, really nice. And I got second place, and so when I continued to compete, they would recognize it in the newsletter. The year that I won, 2003. I went all around my district practicing, and I don't want to get too far ahead and talk about my journey, but one of my last practices was a thing at my company, and they made a big deal about it and invited people to come, and there were probably about 70 or 80 people in our biggest conference room for my final practice, and so they knew I was competing, and then when I won, they did make a deal out of it, so it was nice. I have still largely remained in an IT capacity, but there have been times when they have put me to work for presentation skills and helping train territory managers and district managers and things of that nature. So
Okay.
so it's not quite as widely known now because more time has passed and people have left. And I mean, they don't herald it to every new employee. So there are some people who it's not quite on their radar.
I got you. Okay. So now we're going to start with the journey. So
Yep.
what was tell me about okay, so you got involved or you went to the first meeting, you did get involved, and
Mm-hmm.
the second time you did. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about the first time you went to a conference. Did you go to a conference your first year? Tell me about your first conference and what was that like?
So I joined in January of 2000, and the uh, the first conference I went to was that fall of 2000. Um, Before the fall, and what one of the things that drove me to the contest was, or the conference was the success I had in the humorous speech contest. Um, Things outside the club largely were not on my radar um, right away. When I joined, not too long after that, the International Speech Contest season got started, and I hadn't done enough speeches to qualify to compete. So I didn't really dive in to the possibility of things that were outside the club. So the first conference I went to was the fall conference in 2000. It was, I think it was in Tyler, Texas, I don't think it was in Shreveport. Actually, you know what? For folks who don't know, there is a little tiny scoop of northwest Louisiana that is in my home district. It's the Shreveport Bossier City area. I don't remember if this conference was there or Tyler, Texas, but it was somewhere on the eastern side of our district. But it was a fall conference. It was my first exposure to things on a large scale outside my club. By that point, I had been to an area contest and a division contest, but I didn't really have a good sense of the organization, beyond those levels. It was really eye-opening, and I met a lot of really, really good people who ended up being folks who mentored me in various ways and have really contributed to my growth.
So you started competing from the beginning.
I wanted to compete from the beginning, but I wasn't able to because I didn't have the 6 speeches for the International Speech Contest. So as soon as it became an option in the fall, I jumped into the humorous speech contest.
Okay, gotcha. Now, you've already competed.
Mm-hmm.
What was the event, or maybe it was a person that 17 years later you won okay, first of all, you won the world championship in 2003. You're still here. What was it
I am.
that made you a lifer? Was it a person? Was it an event?
I don't think it was a particular event. And as far as a person, I think it's probably a collection of influences. I look at Toastmasters, and I've had people ask me, so you won the world championship, you're still in Toastmasters, you still go to meetings, why do you do that? And I say, well, for me, continuing to go to Toastmasters is for the same reason that a person who gets in good physical shape still goes to the gym.
Mhm.
You know, I want to keep, you know, those speaking leadership muscles, if you will. I want to keep them strong and sharp. And I know that if I withdraw from Toastmasters, or if I don't put those things into use on a regular basis, those skills will, you know, do something similar to atrophy. I mean, they won't remain as strong. And in connecting with some people who are just phenomenal people who have given me great mentorship and such, it's just I cannot, I have chosen to make myself incapable of imagining not being in Toastmasters. I mean, I can't imagine it, because I still get a lot of, I get a lot of enjoyment. I get, there's entertainment that I get as you know, in different functions. But I also realize that there are people who are joining the organization today who can benefit from having some of the experience that I've gone through related to them. So I still grow from it, but I also am a lifer because I know there's some things I can do to give back.
Right. You know, I heard Les Brown say the same thing. He said if he doesn't speak for 30 days, he'll know it. He said if
Yeah,
he will speak for 90 days, he said the audience will know it.
right. Yeah,
And,
I agree.
yeah, I always say the same thing, when I try to explain it, it's not like riding a bicycle. They always hear me say, it's not like riding a bicycle. It's more like working out. The more
Yeah,
you do it, the better you get.
right,
Quite simple. So, and that's why I do it so much. So I don't want to lose those speaking muscles, as you call them. Right.
right. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to move right along. Since we've been beating around the bush of the competitions, whether it been just at the beginning or the whole journey of competing in the finals, man, that's strong, 3 consecutive years. That is real strong, man, because I mean a lot of times it's hit or miss. That doesn't, a lot of people aren't at that level. But
Yeah.
if you look back from now to where you are right now, just from a competition aspect of it, compared
Mm-hmm.
to where you were when you first started, what has competing done for you personally or business, both actually? But I'm more interested in what has it done for you personally.
Well, my journey forced me to grow uh, as a person considerably. Um, there is a keynote address I do that's about an hour, and I kind of unfold the whole thing. I'll try to distill it down to a somewhat brief answer. I have always been very, very competitive, and so I initially was drawn to the competition because this is something where I can excel, I can win, and I was very, very win focused, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as there's a healthy balance there, and you're growing during the process. And I was, but I was very focused on winning. So um, when I went to the finals in 2000, I took second place, and I considered that a really high honor because the level of competition that year especially was so very high. So I competed again in 2002, and I got to the World Championship for the second year in a row, which is not done very frequently, and I got second place again. I was not quite as thrilled that time because I was very win focused, and the significant growth that I had to go through was realizing that nothing is a given, and that there are multiple measures of success that need to be recognized. Because my focus at that point was I'm all about the win. I got to have the trophy. I got to have the best speaker ribbon. Whatever it is, I have to be get the accolades from people. But the other measures of success that I had to realize and focus on is every single time I get the opportunity to speak, I have the chance to stretch and grow and strengthen those skills. And there's a personal growth aspect there, and that's a valid measure of success that sometimes we overlook, especially in terms of competing in contests. But I also had to come to the realization that every single time I get the chance to speak, I have the opportunity to do something valuable for the audience, something meaningful, something helpful, something valuable, and that's a significant measure of success as well. So one of the big growth areas I went through caused me to step back from the singular focus on winning and look at it as a complete and whole experience where I could succeed in multiple ways. If I got the big trophy, that would be great, but there are ways that I could grow in spite of that. Now, the other thing that has caused a significant amount of growth is that if you have success in the contest, and if you win the World Championship, you will get invited to speak a lot. And that process, I should include two particular words that some of my colleagues do. You get invitations to speak for free, which there's nothing wrong with, and in fact, it's been very beneficial to me because I'm a lot more comfortable speaking to audiences of just about any size because I've had the chance to do it so much. And I've had people, there have been a number of times I get invited to speak at Toastmasters district conferences around the organization, and there have been some times when I've gone back and spoken, 4 or 5 years later or 6 years later at a conference, a district where I've previously been, and I've had people tell me, I saw you speak 5 years ago. You're a lot better now than you were then.
Really?
And so, yeah, well, and it's because of that repetition that you do it more and more and more, and those skills, those presentation skills get stronger. You become that much more familiar with your material or how to incorporate new material. And I think people get the sense when you're in front of an audience and you are in your element and you're at ease. So I think, based on that, since I've won the World Championship, my presentation skills have grown significantly as well.
Wow.
And that plus just my forced recalibration on the importance of winning the overall title caused me to grow a lot as a person.
That's something Craig Valentine talked about a lot, his growth after.
Yeah.
I think if you're somebody like everybody else thinks that, wow, when you get to that point, you're there. And to hear you and other people say how much you grew after that. Wow.
Well, if someone believes that is the pinnacle and they reach it and they cease looking for ways to improve, that is probably the best they will ever be.
Right. So from the beginning, not necessarily from a competition, but overall your career in Toastmasters, what would you say? What was your high point for you?
Well, certainly winning the World Championship was a pretty high point. Actually, one of the things that has been very deeply meaningful to me is that my kids understand that they learned a lot by watching what I did as far as goal setting and prioritizing and having commitment. Because when I was competing, there were a lot of times when I would be up late at night working on speeches or going to clubs and practicing. So they knew that there was some commitment involved in that. But the coolest thing is that they get it. And in fact, in January of 2004, I went over to Shreveport to do a speech contest preparation workshop, and I took my youngest son with me, who at the time he had to be about 13 or 14. I had him introduce me.
Really?
And I heard him. Yeah, and I gave him a written introduction and said, you just need to read this. And the night before, I have an aunt and uncle who live in Bossier, and so we went over and stayed with him. And the night before, I heard him practicing the introduction. And I heard him getting very emotional when he got down to the part where he said, help me welcome my dad, the 2003 world champion.
Wow.
And, hearing that in him and recognizing that it registered with him to that degree, that was a high point. I mean, it's hard to beat. If you care at all about, your role as a parent, it's hard to beat that. So that had been a high point. And of course, there have been other pretty significant high points in some of the connections I've made with people and the friendships that are lifelong friendships that I would have never had the chance to meet those folks. These are people that I've met at district conferences and at international conventions, and I probably also would not have had the chance to travel to some of the places where I've been either, because I have literally had the chance to speak around the world, and it's those are experiences that I don't know that I would have had any opportunity to experience otherwise.
Wow. You know, we're gonna. I want to ask you a question, but I want to. When I first got involved in Toastmasters, just like I think most people, it was all about me.
Oh
And
yeah.
it was all about me and the trophy and nobody else, nothing else. And
Yep.
one of my lows was when I thought I was going to win and I didn't win. What?
Hmm.
When did you? Did you ever experience a low?
Oh yeah, yeah. The the one that stands out the most was in the 2003 World Championship. And I will preface everything that follows this with this statement. The 2002 World Champion is Dwayne Smith, and Dwayne is a great guy. I've had the chance. One of the upsides is I've had the chance to develop good uh, friendships, personal relationships with my colleagues, and Dwayne is a great guy, stand-up guy. And I really really like him. Um, in the 2002 finals, I've never had a chance. I've never had a problem listening to my competitors' speeches. That's just never been a big hang-up of mine. And so I listened to every competitor's speech except the person who went right before me, who was Dwayne. I was backstage. I had my earbuds in. I was getting mic'd up. I was, getting my game face on. And so I didn't hear his speech. So I thought that I won that contest because I'd seen every other speeches. And you are never. Every person lacks the ability to be objective about their own performance because you've got a vested interest in it. Um, there were people in the audience who thought I'd won as well because I had people coming over after the contest, after the interviews, when they were doing announcements. I had people coming over asking if they could, take a picture of me, and so I thought, oh, they thought I won. And the moment when they announced me as second place, and the minutes that followed that were probably the low point because for those who have gone through the competition and who take it seriously, the amount of time and effort and focus and energy that you have to pour into it. And I had done that for 2 consecutive years, and so here it was. I came up short again. And there was all these thoughts. Was that all wasted time? Was that all worth it? Was it? At that point, the pain, the voice of my pain was louder than the voice of reason, saying, "Yeah, but look at how you grew through that process." And so that moment was very intense, and it was very, very, very difficult. Now, that low point became the foundation of a huge amount of growth, and so looking at it through the long lens of time. That was a necessary moment, and it was the start of a lot of growth. But in that moment, if knowing what I know now, would I go back through it again? Yes. But to that point of like, man, I would never want to feel that way again. But
Yeah.
that was probably the low point.
When I was our district conference was in May. So from May to August, I was reading everything. I was watching all of these videos, and just trying to get as much as I possibly can. And I ran across a video of, I'm assuming maybe it was the morning of the finals, or maybe night before. It was you, Darren LaCroix, and Ed Tate.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, here's the thing. Now, obviously, you and Ed Tate are really good friends. He's going to be at our conference during the spring. But
wow, sweet.
yeah, Ed was talking about how he thought that the year prior, your speech, no doubt, he thought that you had won. Okay.
No. No doubt was 2001. And there was no doubt that Darren LaCroix won. But yeah, the speech in 2002 was called "The Line," and I remember him saying that. Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was no doubt because I'm thinking I listened to that speech and I listened to the one from 2003, and I'm like, man, No Doubt was, and from what I've seen, I mean, I thought it was like perfect. I really did. So I just figured I'd just kind of throw that in because I ran across, I was like, wow, that was, that was really good.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're getting ready to kick off our competition season.
Mm-hmm.
Next month, probably we'll start with the club competitions. A lot of people on the call are either they're starting to prepare
Mm-hmm.
or they're thinking about preparing. Okay. Now,
Okay.
been to the finals 3 times. I mean, you're like, this is like Mike Tyson stuff. Nobody that strong. Okay.
But I will not bite off anybody's ear, I promise.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. How do you go about writing? Because you had 3 of them.
Yeah.
How do you go about writing a competition winning speech? Now, people are taking notes now, so
Sure, sure. Well, um, there's a whole workshop that I do on this topic, but the bottom line is you need to decide the biggest question you need to ask yourself is what is it that I want to say?
uh-huh.
You can be technically proficient, you can do all the mechanics correctly, and you can excel at stage presence, but the bottom line is if you don't have a message, then you're not going to come out as well. So when I was competing, and this is after I had gone to the World Championship, I know once, but in having to write a new speech, I asked Mark Brown, I said, okay, so what do you tell people as far as how to choose their topics? And Mark said something that I'll never forget and that cut right through all of the fluff. He said, knowing that I'm a family man, I had 3 children, he said, think about your children. If your time on that stage was the last message you could give to your kids, what would you want it to be? And I realize that not everybody has kids, and so I tell people, think of a child in your life, or think of somebody who is deeply important to you, and if your time in that speech contest, regardless of what level, if it was the last message you would give to them, what is that message? And so when you start with that, then you find how can I express that? What examples or what stories do I have that can connect to that to help people relate to it? And then you look at things like what can I do to establish a connection with the audience? Do I need to come out and acknowledge where we are, or that we're all Toastmasters or whatnot? One of the things that I used to great effect was humor. I mean, your speeches don't have to have humor, but it's a great way to connect with people and establish that direct connection that makes them more accepting of your message. So I would say, get the heart of your message, know what that message is, and then begin developing that out in ways that will connect and relate and that will be memorable. Now, I will say this: I've asked people sometimes, what is the message of your speech? And they start rambling. Well, it's about times in your life when you're going through things, and they ramble on, and I know instantly they're not focused enough. My primary mentor when I was competing was David Brooks. He's the 1990 world champion, and he said, you need to be able to take a business card, if it's that has a blank side, and you need to be able to write what the message of your speech is on the back of that business card. And if you can't, and I'm not talking about little teeny tiny print that you have to get a magnifying glass. I mean regular print. But if you can't write it on the back of that business card, then you don't have enough focus. And so getting clarity on what your message is cannot be stressed enough. I mean, the message of my championship speech is a line from it, and it simply is, it's never too late to follow your dreams. That's the thrust of that speech. Everything else in that speech is about connecting with the audience, giving examples, leading them to a conclusion or an agreement with me on that and that sort of thing. So
Mhm.
I would say, begin with the end in mind. What is that message when you walk off the stage? What is that message that you want to leave them with? And then, develop all those other pieces and how they connect and how you transition from one thing to another based on that. But always keep at the very top, always come back to what is my message, and does this enhance my message? Does it distract from it? Does it connect me to my audience? Does it create some distance? Is it going to make people lean in and want to hug my message? Is it going to make them want to be repelled? I mean, does it connect? Does it work? That sort of thing.
Right. Okay. It's funny that you say that about the message, because the one thing that I tell people is like, of course, you have to begin with the ending line. You start with your message, and I tell them, I say, okay, if you have an idea, you know what your message is. Tell your story to someone else and ask, and wait a couple of days. Hey, do you remember that speech I gave you? Or remember the story that I told you? Yeah. What do you think the message was? And I say, well, if they say, well, I really wasn't paying attention. You can't say, what's the matter with you, stupid? I told you to pay attention. You have to realize that you didn't hold their attention. But if they can give you an answer that's pretty close to what you have in here, then you have it pretty focused. But if they just take off on some other tangent, then that means that you personally, you have to focus on your message a little and work on that a little more.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, when we are this close to that speech or that story, we may think, oh yeah, I know exactly what this message is, but a different perspective that's outside of our head may look at it a whole different way.
Right. Now, when it comes to practicing or preparing, this is a long journey. It's not like, well, you're going to give a speech and maybe a couple of times, and that's it. There is a lot of work. Tell me, and you did it for 3 years in a row. Good. What was that like for you? Because I know if you're talking about 8 months, because the one thing that I said was, the people that you're going to see on the stage in 2017 in Canada, chances are they either written their speech already or they're in the process of it.
Oh yeah.
So what is that whole process like? The preparation of it?
It's a mixed bag. It's very rewarding, but it can also be very demanding and very grueling. I worked, I am and was in IT at the time. I had a full-time job. I had three kids at home, and so there were times when I would work a full day, do some activities with my kids, and then at night I would be up till the wee hours working and editing and practicing. I would back my cars out of my garage to create a larger space where I could kind of work on some of the staging of it. And so there were many nights when I would be up until 2 and 2:30 in the morning, and then get up to go to work at 7 or 7:30. That was hard. That was very hard.
Yeah.
There were times when my commitment, I shared what I was trying to do with my family so they understood, but there were times when I would have to miss significant family events for it. I mean, I remember one time, this wasn't for the preparing aspect of it, but at a contest, at a division contest, I think it was in 2002, or it might have been 2003, but I competed. I did my speech, I walked out of the room, and then I called my wife to check on my son, because on that day, this was on a Saturday afternoon, he was the starting pitcher for opening day on his Little League team, and I missed it because I was at a speech conference. And, though I didn't take it lightly, and I don't want anybody listening to think, oh, he's a horrible parent. I mean, it was something that as a family we were, they were on board with me on that. So it took some dedication, it took commitment, and it took some sacrifice. But that's going to be the case with anything. I mean, if you've got somebody who's working a full-time job and they're going to school at night to try to finish a degree because they want to move into a different career or strengthen their position in their career, that's going to take dedication and focus and sacrifice and all that. So any significant goal you want to go after is going to take a commitment of your time and energy and focus and resources. It's going to take sacrifice. And only through that will you be able to grow and move closer towards that. So it was really, really hard. Now on the upside, I got the chance to go and speak at a bunch of clubs all over my district and also our neighboring district 25 over by Fort Worth. I got the chance to go over and practice at clubs in their district, and it was a blast. I mean, I got to meet a lot of people and I got a lot of feedback, and it was a very, very cool process. So there were upsides, but it wasn't all Skittles and lollipops. I mean, there was some hard work and dedication involved in it as well.
How much were you on the road?
And you're making me go back 13 plus years. It varied, I think. And when I competed, the structure of the contest was different. Now they have the semifinals at the convention. When I was competing, they would have them during the summer at regional conferences, and so I had some time between each of those. So when I won the district contest, I probably went and practiced at somewhere around 25 clubs or so. And so, some of those were same day. I might go to a morning club and then after work drive to an evening club and that sort of thing. So, but I was on the road for approximately 25 practices or so all told. And I practiced at my home club, and I don't even know how many times I practiced privately at home or in a conference room at my office, but a fair amount. I mean, I put several gas tanks full of gas through my car in the process, each of those 3 years that I went to the finals.
Right. Okay. Now we have people, as I said before, that are relatively new on this call. So what advice would you give somebody that was in your shoes once upon a time? That's, as I said, they're going to be competing for the first time. What would you tell them?
Right. Well, a lot of the stuff that we've already covered, as far as their speech goes, be focused on what your message is, and also, understand that there are multiple measures of success that you can have, not just winning, but also the personal growth and doing something valuable for your audience. And so I would tell them that. I would tell them to, it sounds like a cliche, and you hear it about everything that's competition involved, whether it's sports or whatnot, but it's truly a thing to take to heart. Enjoy the journey, because the club contest, the area contest, all those contests, I mean, those can be enjoyable. Don't get so wrapped up with anxiety about the outcome that you can't enjoy the events, the people, the connections that you can build. And so I would say enjoy the journey. If you take it seriously and you do want to win, I would say get on, avail yourself of resources and see what some of the top level speeches look like. Get on YouTube. I mean, that's something, and I hate saying this because it makes me sound like such an old man, but back in my day, we didn't have all these videos on YouTube. Actually, I did. There was a guy in my district when I won district in 2001 who asked me if I would like to borrow his videos. He had a library of videos from World Championships, and this is back when they were on VHS, which is a thing you have to hold in your hand. They weren't online.
Right.
But I did. I studied past videos. I took notes. The other thing I would say, in the fall of 2000, when I was at my district conference to compete in humorous speech, I don't know why they did this, because I've only ever seen this offered at TLIs outside of conventions or conferences, but they were offering judges training as one of the educational tracks at the conference. So I took it. So I recommend to people, take judges training, and at whatever point you're no longer in the competition, volunteer to judge, because through that process you gain a greater understanding of what the judges are looking for, how they evaluate a performance, what kind of thought processes they go through when they have to do that comparison of who am I going to rank first, second, or third. That process will benefit you greatly in subsequent years as you compete. So if your district is offering TLIs or any kind of judges training before your contest this year, jump on it, take that training, because it will help you, understand the scene, the process, the whole thing more deeply. And now I will say this, and I don't want to make a big commercial offering out of this, but I have developed resources that may be helpful for that if you're interested in them. My website is jimkey.com. They're available there. Or if you have particular questions about some of those, you can email me. But at the very least, go out on YouTube and look at videos with a notepad and ask, why did this work? How did that person connect? What was it about this particular story that worked well? And put yourself in the student mindset as you're going through that, and absorb all the things you learn, and then use those when you're writing and editing your speech.
Awesome. Folks, you heard it. Our judges training is going to be February 8th. February 8th.
Oh, cool.
I'm so glad you brought that up. And don't forget jimkey.com. It's going to be posted on our website. But for those people that are going to be competing, man, I'm telling you, get ahead of the game. Start getting these ideas. Start writing your speech right now. Okay, we talked about the new folks. Now, like folks like me, Lord, once upon a time, we both been there. Now, somebody's thinking, well, I got devastated last year, or I got devastated a couple of years ago. I heard Kobe Bryant say this. He said, it was through basketball. That's how he found out who he was, because he got knocked down. And, am I the person that's going to get up? And am I the person that's going to, recommit myself? And that was, what I went through when I lost. Okay. Right. So to those people that are thinking about, I'm not sure if I want to go through that again. Is it really worth it to go through that again and get thinking that they may, get disappointed again? What would you tell those people?
Well, for people who, and not everybody's like this, but there are people who competed and they've sworn it off because they should have won a contest and they didn't. At least that's their opinion. I understand the mindset, but if they're looking for sympathy or somebody to cry in their beer with them, I'm the wrong guy, because I know. I mean, if you remain focused on how you were wronged or the pain or all that stuff, it will inhibit your growth. It will keep you from re-entering the arena so that you can grow again. And so what I would say is to those people is realize this is a process filled with humans. I mean, judges are human. Speaking is an art. It's not a science. And so the fact that the formula you came up with didn't win means it's not a science. It also means that there may be cases where the judges got it wrong, but that's not for you to decide or anyone else. The thing you have to decide is the growth that I can gain from this worth it? I would tend, in most cases, to say, yeah, it is, but just know that by re-entering that arena, by moving past however you felt about the way things turned out prior, you're putting yourself in a position for growth. You come into it with a greater perspective, or not, I shouldn't say greater. You come into it with a perspective of greater understanding than folks who have never competed before, because you've been around, you've been on that stage, you've seen and learned and grown from that. And so I would say, take those things that you learned and run with it. Enter the arena again so that you can take advantage of the growth. I mean, I don't believe I did a keynote presentation, or a very short keynote for my district years ago, that I entitled Maximum Value. And the way I look at it is, in everything I do, I want to get the maximum value out of it. Well, if you don't take advantage of all the things Toastmasters has to offer, leadership development, speaking development, and contests being a part of the speaking development, you're leaving value on the table. So, in this case, get greedy. I mean, decide, I want to get that value. I want to grow from this process, and, take a deep breath, swallow real hard, and step over that obstacle that of your past experience, and step into the growth opportunity that the contest can offer for you this time.
Right, because it's all about growth. Okay, got a couple of questions for you. This one is from, let's see, Greg Kitchen out of New Orleans. He says, how much humor in general do you suggest for an international speech? And i.e., how many total laughs or laughs every blank minutes on average?
Well, I think humor is important because, number one, there's an expectation of it, but more importantly, it's a great way to connect with your audience. But humor can work for you. It can also work against you, because one of the things you can never predict is how much the audience will laugh. There were in 2001, I wrote a speech, and I kind of budgeted my time accordingly. And I thought, okay, this is going to be about 7 minutes or so. And I think my speech timed out at about 6 minutes and 30 seconds, which meant I thought I was going to be funnier than the audience found me. Which is okay. What you don't want to get into the situation of is when you don't realize how funny the audience thought you were going to be, and so you planned for about a 7 minute and 10-second speech, and the audience laughter pushes you to the point of disqualification. Now, there have been some speeches and at the World Championship that are just so loaded with humor, and they're wonderful. Darren LaCroix is a great example of that. But what I try to do is I try to limit the amount of humor. I mean, I want to have it. I typically front-loaded my competition speeches with them so that most of the humor is in the early stages when I'm connecting with the audience. And what that affords me, the luxury, I guess, it affords me is that if the audience laughs more than I expected, and it kind of pushes me back time-wise, when I see the green light and I know, oh, I should be farther along, I can pick up my pace a little bit. But if you have humor all the way through, that's a little harder to do when you get to the end, because you have certain lines that you have. So I don't think there is an exact number of laughs or exact laughs per minute. But I think if you use it well and use it judiciously, it can be a great benefit to you. Now I'm sorry, Greg. I know your question was more specifics, but like I said before, this is not a science; it's an art, and so you have to find that number, that rhythm that helps you to establish a connection with your audience and introduce your topic. I mean, you don't put jokes in your speech if it doesn't somehow connect to what you're trying to accomplish. I mean, getting a laugh is great. Getting a laugh with a purpose that connects to advancing your message and your speech is what you're shooting for, though.
Okay, good. I have another question from Greg Kitchen from New Orleans. Do you think?
All right, Greg. Greg, stop hogging all the questions. No, I'm kidding. Ask as many as you want.
Okay. Do you think contemporary judges prefer to not hear stories of death or near death?
This is the my colleagues and I call this the DDI index, the death, disability, or injury. Because at some point, so many speeches have them, and I understand why. I mean, you have 7.5 minutes, and you have to connect, and especially if you're trying to connect on an emotional level, or you're trying to share, something of depth of feelings that you have. A lot of times, people gravitate to those kinds of stories. Do judges these days, how do they feel about them? Do they prefer them? Do they not like them? I can only tell you how I judge contests in my district, and the way that I feel about it is, does it feel gratuitous? Does it feel like they're just trying to evoke a response from me, or does it connect well with what their speech is doing or trying to do? If out of the blue, I mean, if somebody started their speech with telling me about how their uncle had a heart attack and died, and then they launched right into that, I would feel, okay, this early in, they haven't established a connection yet. That feels kind of manipulative, and I don't like that. But when it is sort of a natural unfolding of a story, um, I'm I'm okay with it. Bless you.
Okay.
So I think it depends on how you do it. I don't think it is a requirement. And there have been a lot of speeches that have been quite successful that did not have that. But just I would say pay attention to how you incorporate it, whether or not it is an organic part of your speech, or does it feel kind of manipulative? Because I'll tell you, if I feel this doesn't really apply to the contest. I mean, it applies to the contest, but also outside of it. If I feel like a speaker is trying to manipulate me emotionally, that's it. I'm done. I don't care what they have to say, and they could just sit down and shut up because I'm not interested after that.
You know, the video that I was talking about with you, Darren Croy, and Ed Tate, remember, that's the one thing that Ed Tate said, because he had called Dell Brooks and said, you know, I got a problem. Nobody dies in my speech.
Right,
Right.
right.
And I think it was someone from Toastmasters International said the exact same thing that you just said, that sometimes, you know, judges get tired of that because they feel as if, you know, the speaker's trying to manipulate them with
Right.
that.
Well, the other aspect of that is that if every whether it's stories of death or anything, if every speech had a common thing, then people are it's going to not have as much effect. It's kind of like there's a line from The Incredibles, the animated movie, that says, when everybody is special, nobody is. Well, when every speech, if every speech had the same joke, it wouldn't be effective. And so I look for things to incorporate that are uniquely mine, and whether or not to include stories of death or injury or disability, I think fall into that category.
Okay, great. Last question. This one's from Mr. Phil Verona and your stomping grounds of Baton Rouge.
Oh, hey, Phil.
Okay. Obviously, preparation is important, but how do you know when you're starting to overdo it? And I can kind of lead into that one. And you were talking about going to another district
Mm-hmm.
to do speeches. I think it was the week before I went to DC. I went over to, I think it's District 56, which is the Houston area. I spoke
Oh,
at
okay.
I spoke now I had been speaking all week. I spoke at a club at 7:30, and I drove and stopped at a noon club, a corporate club, gave my speech there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all in one day. And I went to New Orleans and gave my speech again. And while I was there, someone called me and said, "Hey, you know, we're meeting in the morning. Would you like to stop and give your speech on the way back home?" I'm like, "Okay, sure." I go there. It's like maybe another 7:30, 8 o'clock meeting in the morning. Did my opening and totally went blank.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yep.
now to me, that was I knew I had overdid it, but the question is, posed to you. So when do you know when you've overdone it?
Well, I had a similar experience. I think that if you're not allowing enough time between practices to process the feedback, to absorb that, if there's feedback that you accept, you put it in your speech, you work it in, and you have that be a part of your. I don't want to get too hung up on memorization, but you have that be a natural part of your speech. If you're not allowing enough time to do that, then that's one way that you're overdoing it. And I had a case where I had practiced. I think I practiced at a noon club, at an evening club one day, and then the next day I practiced at a morning club and a noon club. And by the time I got to that noon club, and I was videoing my practices, and that's another thing I would recommend people to do: video your practices so that you can review it yourself. But I got maybe a minute into my speech, and I forgot what version of my speech I was on because I had gotten all this feedback. And so I went blank, and I was like, I need to start over. Now, I will say this: the people at that club were delighted that I screwed up because, Jim Key's human. He screws up too. Like, yeah, absolutely I do. But, if you get to that point where you're not allowing yourself to process that feedback and accept or decline, whatever you're going to there, and make it yours, then you're overdoing it. I also think if you get to the point where it's a performance more than a conversation, I might want to take a step back from that too. I mean, I want every speech to be a living, breathing, real-time conversation. There are things that you want to do well in terms of the delivery mechanics and your staging and all that. I mean, those things are not unimportant. But when they take the precedence over you establishing that real connection and just talking heart to heart with your audience, regardless of what size they are, that's the point at which I would probably, kind of step back and maybe take some of the polish off so that it's a real living, breathing, real-time conversation.
Awesome. Great. That's our time. Jim, thank you very much, folks. Remember, jimkey.com. Take a look at those resources and, really get this thing going. I want to thank you again for taking the time out of your night to, to spend with us. But I'll get the opportunity to see you in a couple of months because I'll be speaking at you guys' spring conference, actually. So,
oh, sweet. I had not heard that yet. Cool.
Was that, well, I'm kind of letting the cat out of the bag.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Okay. Well, right. I'm not going to spread the word until my district leaders do that because I'm not going to get.
Okay, well, you didn't hear from me.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Jim. You got everybody have a good night.
All right. Good night, folks.
Good night.